Tonight's title is What Makes Entrepreneurs Successful? I'll begin with the question. What do you think are the key factors for success as an entrepreneur or business owner? And I'll put it out to the room to get some insight into this.
A really great sense of humour.
Okay, yeah.
Resilience.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, it was a resilience, great sense of humour. What else do you think is really important for entrepreneurs to become successful?
Vision, taking action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would say that follow through.
Follow through, yeah. Okay,
Follow through so that you have a process that you actually get people there.
Which is actually pretty rare. A lot of people don't follow through.
And having a community is really important. Having a community, I think, is really important too, as we go through our ups and downs.
Doing what makes you happy. Yeah.
Doing what makes you happy?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. As long as you can make money from it, I guess, yeah. Otherwise, you'll be happy and broke. Stephen, what about you? What do you think makes success in entrepreneurs?
I was thinking one thing would be either flexibility or just the willingness to pivot. So you don't have one idea and I'm just going to run that into the ground. You need to adapt and change as needed. So
yeah, and that's quite interesting too, because one of the things that I've discovered over the years with entrepreneurs, they either give up too early, right? So I think Babe Ruth said this: you're only a strike away from a home run, basically. So one of the things is they give up too early, or they hang in too long. So the old Kenny Rogers, you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. Right, and it takes a lot of experience as an entrepreneur as to when should I throw the towel in. This sort of leads into what I'm going to share with you as well. So what I'll do is I'll come back to the thing.
So all these factors and traits come up, things like optimism, curiosity, resilience, emotional intelligence, the idea, discipline, capital, grit, creativity, network, self-awareness, execution, communication, timing, passion, hard working, courage, genius, will, motivation, focus, etc. And as you can see, there are lots of factors associated with successful entrepreneurship. However, from research as an academic, there are two primary factors, and the reality is you are more likely to succeed as an entrepreneur if you have rich parents. So the question is, why is that the case? Can anyone answer that?
They know what it takes to get rich. They've seen their parents do it and what hard work and what they have to do to get there.
Mm-hmm.
I think also they don't have daily bills. They can focus full time on their idea or on whatever, and not trying to do it in their spare time or maintain another day job that they might not like or that takes up too much time.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, one other thing would be the connections. If you've got rich parents, there's a very good chance either you went to the right schools or they know other rich people or well-connected people and can do introductions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what about you, Elena? You have an answer to that as well, or?
Well, they've got the foundations. They can lend you money to get started.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And bail you out if you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Deb King?
I would say that their identity of success and financial capacity is possibly higher than people who are not growing up in potentially that environment.
Yeah.
However, there's plenty of people that have been successful coming from nothing. So
we'll talk about that. Without a doubt, there's no argument against that. What I'm saying is that the probability-wise, the chances are, and we'll talk about how that occurs, and you'll get some better insight. But you're absolutely correct, Deb.
Because I've noticed some people that are really hungry, and that has been better than there's plenty of people with rich parents that do nothing.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. But I'm talking about in terms of entrepreneurship, and I guess the reason you guys are all right, all correct, and I guess the primary reason is, first of all, when you have rich parents, you actually have a fallback position. So, like Stephen was saying, that you don't have to eat ramen noodles, right? And you can take your business further, right? Whilst other people might be eating ramen noodles and suffering. Now, you can still drive around your BMW, right? And still have a good life and actually the business might not make money for 4 years. It doesn't worry you, right? Because most people, there's only a certain amount of time they can eat ramen noodles for, then they fall over. So that's coming back to the thing I was telling you earlier, that people give up too early. That's the first thing. Second thing is more likely to take a larger risk because they have a fallback position. So the larger the risk, the larger the reward. And of course, the third thing, like all you guys were saying, is the network, right? So that's quite interesting, right? So the second reason, if your parents have had a business before, again, the question is why? And the reality is that you have grown up in an environment where you can watch your parents succeed or fail, or you understand what it takes. And sometimes the best way to learn is learn from others, learn from watching others. So these are the two primary things that are key reasons, which is not really aligned to what we believe entrepreneurship is all about. So it's quite fascinating. Yep.
I think that's why I also say that younger people who have had parents in business have been able to succeed earlier, and the rest of us have had to learn from more from our mistakes to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a constant learning thing. But there is one thing interesting, and this I will reveal this, right?
Successful entrepreneurs are able to leverage firstly their networks and secondly an ecosystem. So then what makes entrepreneurs successful? Well, up until 1985, research was focused on personality traits and characteristics, as it was believed psychological factors intrinsic to humans had a significant influence on the individual's decision to become an entrepreneur. And needless to say, circumstances such as personal need or access to opportunity plays a huge role. And entrepreneurship typically arises out of a need to survive or when an opportunity presents itself. And subsequently, it has been discovered that environmental factors also played a contributing role in the decision-making process to establish startup ventures. And significant environmental factors include an existing entrepreneurial ecosystem, cultural factors, and exposure to business in early life, like we've already discussed. And that is, your parents may have run a business when you were growing up. However, successful entrepreneurship requires an ecosystem, and the term is originally derived from ecology. An ecosystem is interaction between plants, animals, microorganisms, and their environment. And all things in an ecosystem, living and non-living, work together to be one functional unit. And here is an example of an ecosystem. Now, to be a successful entrepreneurial ecosystem, to begin with, a country must have a stable banking system, one that is liquid, transparent, and is able to provide credit to entrepreneurs. Now, I urge those people that are entering a foreign country to make sure it has a stable banking system, and if it doesn't, don't enter the country. And the reason is, if you do, you'll be at the mercy of an underground banking system or a peer-to-peer lending system that pretty much only locals have access to. So you as the foreigner will be shut out and probably will be at the mercy of moneylenders and sharks. The Chinese diaspora do this very well in many foreign countries. It also happens in Australia as well, with many migrant communities offering peer-to-peer lending services, creating an underground banking system. And secondly, it requires favourable government policies towards property rights and ease of doing business.
Has anyone ever looked at the Ease of Doing Business Index on the World Bank? Anyone? No?
No.
Well, it's a really good tool to use. It's a free tool. You can just Google Ease of Doing Business World Bank, and it'll list the top countries in the world where doing business, from 1 to 190, right? So, and then it looks at I think it looks at about 12 different factors. One is, ease of getting credit. One is, able to have property rights, all that sort of stuff. So I would always urge someone, if they're going into a foreign country, at least check out that World Bank ranking. It's called the Ease of Doing Business ranking.
Is that for foreigners looking to go into that country?
Yeah.
Some countries thinking China would be much easier, might be very easy for native Chinese people, but foreign people coming in is.
Well, but even doing internally, you've still got to have certain property rights. You've got to have a banking system. You've got to have policies, all that stuff.
I'm sure.
So So I think it just ranks it in general rather than saying, hey, you're a foreigner. It's good for foreigners, don't get me wrong, but these are things you need to consider when starting a business, even if it's in Australia. If it's something wrong with the banking system, then you've got to sort of say to yourself, well, is Australia the right place to do things? If it doesn't have favourable government policy towards entrepreneurship, you've got a problem, right? Because then the barriers to entry are really high for entrepreneurs. And you find places like, European countries, they don't do so well in entrepreneurship. Some countries like Germany, France, and because they've got too much red tape and barriers to entry into business. All right, so they prefer not to be entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs aren't held as a high regard. They would rather look at it as a corporate function. You go get a job and work in a corporation that's much highly regarded. So there's no emphasis on entrepreneurship. And
even in Australia, then you find banks will lend you lots of money for property, but starting a business, I don't know about that.
Well, the thing is, if you have property, no matter how bad your business is, they'll lend it because they don't care, right? Because your property is secured against that. So where do you think Australia ranks globally, roughly? Anyone have an idea?
Oh, one of the top, I'd say. One of the top.
It varies year by year, but we're sort of 12th or 14th or 15th roughly.
Who's number one?
Do you want to guess who number one is?
Yeah.
America.
I've just Googled it, so I've cheated.
It's places like New Zealand, actually.
Oh,
and they're number one. They've been number one for a while, but it changes. And Singapore, right? Okay, cool. And America's up the top there as well. Probably UK. And then places like Yemen and those, Somalia, those sort of people at the bottom somewhere. Is that what you found, David? Is that what you looked at?
Yeah, it's New Zealand, Singapore, Hong Kong, Denmark, Korea, US, Georgia, UK, Norway, Sweden, Lithuania, Malaysia, Mauritius, Australia.
Right, there you go. So Australia doesn't even rank in the top 10. No, it's easy to do business in Malaysia. So this is just some food for thought. If you're growing your business or you want to expand your business, it's a really important thing to understand is, and I know I've dived into Fiji, and when I looked into Fiji, they were ranked 39th in the world, which is not bad, right, for a small country. That was in 2006. In 2019, they were 105th or 6th, basically, in the world. If you can back me up on that, David. So, the ease of doing business has become significantly hard over the last 12, 15 years. All right. So just thing to note, really, really important.
I imagine Hong Kong will be dropping
Absolutely.
down.
Well, that ranking is probably 2019. And I looked at the rank. I looked at the millionaires leaving. There's a millionaires index, right, and where they're leaving from. And I think 15,000 are leaving Russia. 3,000 this year for 2022. 3,000 have left Ukraine, and about 3,000 left Hong Kong. And where they're going to, would you believe it or not, it's UAE, Australia, and Singapore. They're the top three of net gainers, right? As well as New Zealand's up there as well. So it is interesting how these things do work.
And it requires an addressable market and a whole lot of other factors as shown in the following framework.
Right, when I mean addressable market, there've got to be paying customers in there. All right, so there's no point in going to a country which just doesn't have the market or ability to pay. For instance, you might have a great course, $3,000 course, and try to market in India. It just won't work, basically. There are other things, and I'll just show you in a moment. So one of the things we looked at is the thing called the Babson Framework.
And this framework is known as the Babson Framework, or BEEP, the Babson Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Project. And it consists of 6 elements. Firstly, policy. Second, finance. Third, culture. Fourth, supports. Fifth, human capital. And finally, 6th, markets. And there are 1 to 3 pillars under each element, and there are n amount of agents under each pillar. And it's used to define what supporting institutions and agents are required for a successful entrepreneurial ecosystem. So here are the pillars and agents. Firstly, under policy, leadership. So things like unequivocal support, social legitimacy, open door for advocates, entrepreneurship strategy, an urgency, crisis, and a challenge. In terms of government, it's things like institutions, investment, support, etc. Financial support, example R&D grants. regulatory framework incentives such as tax benefits, research institutes, and venture-friendly legislation such as early-stage venture capital tax benefits, and fair and easy bankruptcy laws, contract enforcement, property rights, and fair labour rights as well. And then there's financial capital. So there must be things like microloans, angel investors, friends and family, zero-stage venture capital funds, private equity, public capital markets, debt, etc. Then, in terms of culture, there must be success stories, so visible successes, wealth generation stories for founders, and also international reputation stories, and societal norms. For successful entrepreneurship, there must be a culture of tolerance of risk, mistakes, and failure. And there must be room for innovation, creativity, and experimentation. And also a high social status for entrepreneurs is really important. And it must have an ability to generate wealth for the founders and entrepreneurs. And there must be a societal norm towards ambition, drive, and hunger for success in entrepreneurship. In terms of supports, there are non-government institutions, example entrepreneurship promotion in non-profits, business plan contests, conferences, entrepreneur-friendly associations. In terms of support professions, legal, accounting, investment bankers, and technical experts and advisors. In terms of infrastructure, there must be easy access to telecommunication that provides cheap, fast, reliable mobile phone and internet services. And there must also be access to cheap and efficient transportation and logistics services, and access to reliable and cheap energy sources. And there must be tax-free industrial zones that encourage companies to set up there, as well as incubation centres and industry clusters like the type you find in Detroit, America for the automobile industry, and also places like Shenzhen in China for the electronics industry. In terms of human capital, there must be things like education institutions, so general degrees, professional, academic, also specific entrepreneurship training. In terms of labour, there must be access to skilled and unskilled labour forces, serial entrepreneurs, and also later generation family that can provide experience and know-how. And finally, in terms of markets, there must be access to entrepreneurs networks, diaspora networks, such as the ones that we see from China and India, and also multinational corporations. In terms of early customers, early adopters for proof of concept, expertise in productizing, reference customers, first reviews, and also good distribution channels. And this is where the Connect Collaborative fits in, both in networks and success stories. So we must be able to see visible success stories, things like good news stories, and what's possible video testimonials.
Now, here is countries with the best and worst entrepreneurship ecosystem in each region. Again, really important to understand. Not surprisingly, America, the US is number one. Number two is Switzerland, and this is a little bit out of date because it's about 2018, right? It's hard to get information on this because they do reports every so often. And Australia is number 5, but it's the biggest in Asia Pacific. Places like Israel, not surprising. They're in the Middle East, tech capital, and Chile was not surprising as well. They're really good in having an entrepreneurial ecosystem. Again, Bangladesh being the worst, not surprising. Libya, not surprising. Venezuela, not surprising. Mexico, not surprising. Bosnia-Herzegovina, not surprising that will have the worst ecosystems. Any questions about that?
Interesting that Australia's ranked so high considering the very small market in comparison to especially other countries in Asia Pacific. But
Sure. But it's not about the market size, it's about the ability to do entrepreneurship. So it's the actual ecosystem, that is the policies in place from the government, the actual banking system. We've got quite a transparent banking system, even though it's not favourable towards entrepreneurs. Also, we've got lots of hubs and a lot of things these days that contribute to the actual ecosystem themselves. Now, in terms of global startup ecosystems, right, we can look at cities. And I had to break up this graph, and this is taken from Startup Genome, and this is 2022. It starts 2017 right through 2022, and not surprising, Silicon Valley is number one, probably be number one for a long while. Equal second is London and New York City, which is not surprising because both cities are financial centers of the world. Fourth place is Boston, which is not surprising because they have Harvard University close by and also MIT. Fifth place is Beijing. It slipped a little bit. Sixth place is Los Angeles. and 7th place is Tel Aviv, which is not surprising. 8th place is Shanghai. 9th place is Seattle. And 10th place is Seoul. Seoul has come up a lot. Not sure if you can see this, but it's come from like 18th to 10th. They've invested a lot in their infrastructure and their ecosystem. 11th, Washington, D.C., 12th, Tokyo, San Diego has come up really quickly. Amsterdam, Paris, Berlin, Toronto, Singapore. Singapore's dropped a little bit. Chicago and Sydney. Does Sydney surprise anyone?
Is Sydney actually a rank? It kind of got
20th.
no line to it.
20th, yeah.
I think it must be.
They just popped in recently. Does anyone know why Sydney sort of popped up to 20th? Because over the years, they've had a number of unicorns, and Atlassian was one of them. And in the last sort of 2 years, they've had a couple of billion-dollar companies that just pop up. So they've sort of hit the rankings really, really high. I would have thought Melbourne would be a lot higher. Melbourne used to be about 8 or 9 years ago. Right, they've dropped significantly, but it's not that they've dropped, it's other countries that picked up their game. If you want to be successful in business, chances are you need to go to places like Silicon Valley or London or New York City. I'm not saying you can't do it in Sydney or Melbourne, that's not what I'm saying, but in terms of the research and probability, this is what I've been able to find.
In terms of Australian and New Zealand startup ecosystems, this is what I've been able to find. The top cities are Sydney and Melbourne, and New Zealand as a country, then it's Brisbane and Perth. And believe it or not, New Zealand has quite a significant venture capital market. It's small by international standards, but they have come a long way in the past few years. And this is most likely due because it's a lot easier to do business in New Zealand, which creates a very favourable climate for innovation and entrepreneurship. And the top regional areas include Perth, Canberra and Adelaide. And many people often ask, how does this relate to my business? Well, firstly, entrepreneurship creates growth. And where there is growth, there are opportunities created, such as jobs, consulting, and money and wealth is generated. And these are all created within the entrepreneurial ecosystem.
So I just want to leave you a quote here by Tamara Gillen. She was founder and CEO of Wealth Her. And it's all about your network. So think about who you already know and who they can introduce you to. And believe it or not, I've actually met 2 or 3 brilliant investors via my personal trainer. We keep emphasizing the importance of network, really, really important. It's just another angle of looking at your network.
You never know who knows who.
Absolutely. So essentially, if you want to have a chat at any stage about entrepreneurship development, I'm happy to have a chat with you. I know I've had a couple with Stephen. Obviously, Deb's part of my team, so we have a regular chat about these things. But happy to help you out. Take a call, a one-on-one Zoom call, and see how we can work and collaborate. And there's my education websites as well, and there's my social media stuff. All right. So, any questions?
That was really good, Toby.
Did
Very
you
informative.
get some insights into this?
100%.